Hey, so this is the second sort of moral video I'm making of the day. The last one, of course, was about shaming young people online. Um, I tend to make these videos not to provoke anyone, but solely to share ideas and to lay out my own stance. If people disagree with what I'm saying, that's completely okay. But I really am not trying to hurt anyone or provoke anyone. I'm simply laying out my own views. I'm also open-minded enough if I learn more about a certain subject to sometimes weigh up on my own position on something and reflect on it. Sometimes I do change my views on things. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's quite normal. Um, so the issue I want to talk about is the issue of abortion. It's a very controversial issue. Here in the UK, it's not usually a major issue. It's legal in this country, and we don't usually see it as a big topic of debate. But in our neighbouring country, the Republic of Ireland, it's becoming a hot topic. Amnesty International has made a link on their Facebook page about the subject, and they say that if you have an abortion in Ireland, it can be 14 years in prison. So they've clearly got very, very tough measures against this. Um, Unless I'm mistaken, that makes the Republic of Ireland unique among Western democracies in having such rigid laws with abortion, and certainly unique in terms of those penalties. Um, So I want to just lay out my views a little bit because I think that sometimes this is a very polarizing subject, and so neutral views kind of get sidelined. Now, I believe that my views are relatively neutral. I'll say from the outset, I'm broadly in favor of choice. That is, I'm broadly in favor of women having access to an abortion if they need it. But that doesn't mean I think it's a good thing. And my problem with a lot of the narrative in this is it's very sorry, that's a bin lorry outside. My problem with a lot of the narrative on this is it is very polarizing. It's and both sides get slandered, let's face it. On one side, those who support abortion rights get slammed as murderers, as baby killers, and this sort of thing. On the other hand, those who oppose abortion on moral grounds get slammed as hating women and being opposed to women's right to do what they want with their own body. What I'm going to do here is talk a little bit about my understanding of both sides of the argument and why I've reached the conclusion that I have reached. So I'll start with those who oppose abortion. They will say that far from hating women, their sole interest is in the unborn baby, as they would put it. The other side would say it's a fetus, and it's not a fully developed human being until it's born. So it depends where your line is on that. I think the most important thing in this is the pure medical facts, the pure scientific facts of to what extent the fetus is developed. But those who say that it is an unborn baby, I don't think they hate women, and I think that's a slightly lazy position to take. For one thing, many of those who oppose abortion are women themselves. And it does irritate me that the feminist movement has hijacked this issue to try and make it out that it's male opinions versus female choice. Very often, those who are most outspoken against abortion are other women, and men often support a women's choice. So to try and make it sound like it's men versus women, I think that's misleading. Um, and by an extension of that argument, I think it's wrong that feminists say that men shouldn't have an opinion on this. That's a bit like saying men can't have an opinion on abortion is a bit like saying only soldiers are allowed a view on war. Just because men don't give birth doesn't mean that they should be allowed an opinion on it. Obviously, they don't have the same. Obviously, men don't have the same impact in terms of psychologically speaking and physically speaking. But for example, if you have a situation where a father believes in the right to life, and that's his sincere held belief. That's what it is, because then it's no longer just about a woman's body; it's about a second person. That's their opinion. I'm not saying I agree with that opinion, but I respect that that is their view and that is their stance. So to just dismiss it as hating women, I think is wrong. Another argument would be that half of all unborn fetuses are female. So to argue that it's hating women, I think that's erroneous. Also, it overlooks the fact that in some parts of the world there are gender-specific abortions. Um, for example, in India. So there's a lot of issues in here that are sometimes overlooked. In the case of China, there has been examples of forced abortions. Surely that's just as much of a human rights violation as forcing an unwanted pregnancy. Um, there's often an assumption that those who oppose abortion are doing so based purely on a theological perspective. I don't think that's entirely the case. It's certainly true that a lot of Catholics have issue with this. I'm not quite sure what the position is with Islam and other religions, but I know a lot of Catholics take issue with it from a theological perspective. Now, I'm not one to sort of say that theology trumps human rights, but they would argue that it is a human right issue, the right to life. So I don't think, again, it's a simple case of religion versus women's choice. I think that, again, narrows it down to something more simplistic than it actually is. Now, from the other point of view, um, there is a sovereignty debate. If you believe that life begins at birth, um, then it is a woman's body ultimately, and it is that's where the choice factor comes into it. That it should be her choice what happens to her own body. Also, in cases of rape, it is absolutely appalling to suggest that a woman who's been through that experience should be forced to mother and bring up the child that is the product of a rape. It's not the child's fault, but she shouldn't be expected to do that. I think it's utterly disgraceful. I believe it was Morocco that actually mandated that the rapist would have to marry his victim. Okay, I'm going slightly off topic here, but it's quite clear that in that case, the woman is the victim and should be treated as such. So to give her the extra burden of having to bring up the rapist's child when he's not taking any responsibility for it is an utter disgrace. Um, Also, it's somewhat paradoxical that the Republic of Ireland would sanction gay marriage but not abortion. In other words, being progressive in one way but not in another, depending on how you view progressive, of course. But ultimately, I've had close friends who've had to go through that experience, and the vast majority of women who go through it do not take that decision lightly. Certainly, in the case of those who were close to me, it was not something that they enjoyed, and it wasn't something that was not an easy choice. Um, But ultimately, when I weigh up both sides, if we're talking about life and the development of life, when we talk about birthdays, for example, we talk about someone who's so many years old. Now, we assume that is from the moment they're born. So therefore, to me, the sort of Catholic notion that life begins at conception, well, in that case, wouldn't someone be 1 year old or 9 months old when they're born? So why do we not then start aging someone from the moment of conception? Why do we even bother celebrating birth if conception is the important thing? So it's not a consistent position. If you believe that life begins at conception, then why is there not a consistent sort of view with someone's age, for example, in that argument? Now, what I'm interested in is the scientific argument about when life begins. I think that's very, very important. If I'm opposed to late stage abortion because, from what I understand, the scientific facts are that organs start to be really developed at that stage, and a fetus can't feel pain um, weeks before the actual physical birth. In that case, I don't think the argument that it's just a woman's body is valid because there is another person. But again, it's not a fully developed person, so this is not a simple thing. Um, it just irritates me that it is such a polarizing debate, and people cannot respect other people's view on the subject. If you oppose abortion, you're a woman hater. If you're for abortion, you're a baby killer. Although in a lot of these debates, with the exception of the religious right in the US, in most of the debates, I find that the disrespect of other opinions comes from those who support abortion, and they tend to be really rude and very disrespectful to those who have a different view. And from what I've seen on the debate, I mean, this thing that Amnesty International posted, those who oppose abortion weren't saying, they weren't coming out with things like saying, oh, you're baby killers and this sort of thing. They were simply laying out their reasons why. Now, I do oppose completely Ireland's very harsh line on this, like 14 years in prison. That's appalling, especially for someone who's been the victim of rape. Um, I don't know if that law applies to the woman who's had the operation or well, it wouldn't apply to the abortionist because it's illegal anyway. So it's illegal in the first. Well, yeah. Um, so there's a few final thoughts I'll have on this. Firstly, I disagree that only women can have a view on it. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's like saying only soldiers are allowed an opinion on war, or um, only smokers are allowed an opinion on smoking, or something like that. Um, I think for those who believe that life does begin at conception, then it isn't about one person. That's the point. It's about two people or three people if you include the father. Um, on the other hand, if you believe in abortion rights, then the position is that it's something that is about the sovereignty of the woman's body, and it's also about not forcing a woman to have to raise a child. So I think my final position on this is I support choice up to a point, but I'm opposed to late stage abortion with the exception of rape cases. Although in rape cases, I don't think it would be. I think if a woman was raped, then she should have the right to abort immediately. Um, I think if the services are available, and obviously in the Republic of Ireland they're not, but I think in countries where abortion isn't illegal, um, I do question why someone will wait 9 months before they have the abortion. Um, so I would take issue with that. I don't know why, if if you're going to argue in the right to choice, then why leave it so late? Because that is valid, because it is a valid point of contention. Because the later the fetus develops, the more developed it is as a human being. The organs are developing. That's not a religious opinion. That's a scientific fact. So um, I think the scientific side of this really needs to be brought in because at the moment when I see debates on the abortion issue, it's those who oppose, those who are against. What I want to hear is scientific views on this and medical views about, for example, does the fetus feel any pain, um, about the psychological state of the mother, all these sort of things of the woman. What I'm saying is, broadly speaking, I support choice because I have had friends go through it, and I know what they went through, and I know it's not an easy choice, and I do think that it's. So I'm very sympathetic to women who are in that position, but I also respect the views of those who oppose it, except those who obviously are extremists, someone like firebomb, abortion clinics, and that sort of thing. But I just disagree. Although I'm in favour of choice, I disagree in sort of shouting down those who oppose abortion and saying that their views aren't valid. I do think there's valid points on both sides. So, what's your opinion about this? Do you support life, the right to life? Do you support choice? And tell me why.